Hello, everybody. We're going to wait for everybody to get in here, give everybody a little bit of time to get settled, grab you some coffee or your favorite beverage, and grab your blanket. We've got a good one tonight. And I'm so glad to be back. So glad to be back here with everybody. I've missed everybody. Um, but yeah, this is going to be a really, really good one. So when you get in, say hello to the odd mama. She has missed everybody. And if you're new here, let us know, say hey and let us know where you're from. We always like new victims here in the crypt. And while we do that, I'm just going to do a little bit of quick housekeeping. So we do have a couple of things going on. I know that we announced this about, a couple of weeks ago, but we are for real legit now. We have incorporated. We are now an incorporated company. So, we're really excited about this. I think it's going to open up a whole lot of new avenues and opportunities for us. So, super excited about that. Also, we are revamping the newsletter. It's going to be a e-zine, and I hope you guys are signed up for it. If you are not, you can go to PBDC, uh, or I'm sorry, psychobunnydc.com or psychomantium13.com, which is a little harder to spell. Go ahead and sign up for the newsletter. We're going to have a lot of really cool things in there. It's going to be quarterly this time rather than monthly, so we won't be bugging you a lot. But we want to make this, by our community and for our community. And so if you've got like birthday announcements, happy anniversaries, anything like that that you would like to submit and have us put it in the community area, please do so. And there is a way to contact us through contact on the website. So you can do that. Let's see, what else do we have going on? We've got something super special coming up in December, but we've got to get everything like pegged down and nailed down. But I think you guys are going to be really excited about it. I know we are. I know we are. So, yeah, we've got that coming up. Some short announcements. Actually, Roots Bleed Red will be going live tomorrow night. So I've got you for the whole evening. It'll just be us and me. So yay! But we are going to miss them. I know that this is normally their night. But they're going to be going tomorrow night, Saturday. Then of course, Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat will be on Monday as normal, and I think he'll be closing out his season fairly fairly soon. And then we are, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, You Can't Sit With Us podcast is going to be on Tuesday night. So we're having to move that just to coordinate with the holiday schedules and things like that. So yeah. So I hope everybody is in here. I hope everybody is ready. We're going to get started. I'm going to check the chats real quick, see if anything's going on here. Oh, and we do. Let's see. We have Aka in the house. Hello, Aka. How are you? Let me back up here. We have Stephen P. Kitty Cat. Hello, Stephen. And Hexus is here. And let's see, Jenny. Hi, Jenny. How are you? It is so nice to have you here this evening. And so, yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So, what we're talking about tonight, we're doing a part. It's going to be in several parts, just because I, when I started researching this, I thought it would be a fairly short subject. We were going to talk about the London's Magnificent Seven, which are just some absolutely beautiful examples of Victorian cemetery architecture and things like that. So we were going to do that, but then I started asking myself, and I was like, well, why did they build these seven cemeteries? And the more I looked, of course, going deeper down the rabbit hole, the more I found. And I think that I had like a really romantic idea of what it was like during the 19th century. So and I know this is kind of a school lesson, but if it's like the 1800s, it's really the 19th century. If it's the 1900s, it's the 20th century. I don't know why it does it that way, but that's how it does it. So everything that I thought about the 19th century, a lot different, a lot different. So what I would probably suggest you do is take everything that you think you know about the 19th century as far as living conditions and things like that. And this would have been the time of like Bram Stoker's Dracula, that kind of thing. Um, let's see, Bram Stoker's Dracula. What would be something else that would have fallen during that time? I guess that would be a good example around that time period. But take all that romantic ideas that you have, just gather them all up in a ball, walk to the bathroom, and throw them in the toilet. Because the real living conditions and daily life were a whole lot different than I think books and movies have us believe. And of course, I always try to use things in a first person if I can find real accounts of things that, like accounts of those times. So hang on just one second. Let me check something real quick. Let's see. Oh, we got more comments. That's what it is. Comments looks like they've changed places. Oh, there's John. Hello, John. Hello, Connor. All right. Oh, and thank you, Jenny. Jenny says, I'm good. You look amazing. Thank you so much. So, yeah, so just take everything you thought you knew about the living conditions and kind of just daily life of the 19th century, wad them up into a ball, and throw them in the toilet. So, but I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of an overview of what this really started out as. So to some, and I'm not one of them, a cemetery may seem like a really odd place to visit for pleasure, which I absolutely adore them. But when they are as beautiful as London's Magnificent Seven, how could anyone stay away? That's what I think anyway. But of course, I live in a crypt, so hey, what do I know? Now, developed at the edges of London in the decades starting around 1832, at the time they set a new aesthetic, just kind of an aesthetic period for burial of the dead, for the way that cemeteries look. Now, built over, it took a 10-year period for them to build the Magnificent Seven cemeteries. And they focused primarily and very carefully on very carefully planned and planted foliage, as well as accents to architecture and things like that. And I'm going to show you some examples later on when we get further into the subject of these particular. We'll go through each one of them because each one of them is a little bit different. Now, as well, all seven are home to, like I said, stunning architecture and extremely interesting history. But again, we must stop before we get into, the cemeteries themselves. We need to go back to why they were actually, how they came about, how they were conceived. So in the 1800s, that was a really big growth period and century, really, for London. The population grew by nearly 7 times over that century. London became the world's largest city and was in many ways a global center. At the same time, the city did have difficulties, though, because of that rapid growth. And this would have been the time to where the Industrial Revolution wasn't brand new, but it was really getting started. It wasn't at its you know, pinnacle top, but it was headed in that direction. Now, London was sharply divided between the rich and the poor. However, the poor did outnumber the rich. The poor lived in the eastern part of the city, whereas the rich lived in the western part of the city. The politicians and the rich who lived in the west easily ignored that half, or actually more than half, of the city was actually poor. Now, many new neighborhoods were formed during the century due to population increases. It went from 1 million people to somewhere around almost 7 million within that century. So it's huge, huge growth. And that's, again, a lot because of the Industrial Revolution. A lot of the farms were going to, they didn't need, as many field workers and things like that because things were becoming more automated. And so people were moving to the city to be able to find work. Now, in the 19th century, as London grew and pressure on houses and rooms increased, any open space, it could be remnants of a market garden, a marshy meadow that had not previously been seen as profitable for building, or the grounds of former farmhouses. So basically, just about every terrain became a valuable asset to what is called a jerry builder. So a jerry builder would be somebody that built things kind of quickly, and I'll explain. So these particular parcels would be leased for 21 years or even less. So these jerry builders, or the builders themselves, had actually very little incentive to put up anything other than hovels that would last really no longer than about that time. Most houses had no foundations. A lot had dirt floors, and the walls were just the thickness of half a brick. The yards and streets were unpaved and without drains. Now, the primary source of energy at that time was coal. Now, coal was used for several different things, from heating houses, cooking food, and mostly for like heating water to produce steam for a lot of the new factories and power machines and things like that. Now, the bad thing about coal was that it created a lot of air pollution, and a lot of smoke, and a lot of like, and again, this is that whole romantic idea of how things were. And I know a lot of you probably already know this, but when you watch the movies and you see like the spooky, like London fog and stuff like that, that really, I mean, yes, there is a lot of moisture in that part of the world, but a lot of that was due to the coal mills or the burning of coal. To the point that at its height, it was not uncommon for, and I forget the name of it, but basically clouds of this coal smoke would move through particular neighborhoods. And of course, it was, the slums and the poor and things like that. And it could suffocate entire households as they slept. So it was extremely dangerous. So you just, kind of in your mind's eye, start thinking about what the living conditions may have been for these people, and it's only going to get worse. Now, the city, of course, was just, it was dirty and it was noisy and it was overcrowded. The houses were built very close together, so there was very little light or fresh air inside them, really no circulation. They did not have running water, and people found it difficult to keep clean. Houses often suffered from damp due to their thin walls and roofs made out of cheap materials and thatch and stuff like that. Many households had to share a single outside toilet, which was usually referred to as a cesspool. And those could either be located outside or even in the basement of the tenement building. And it was basically just a big ditch. It was just a big ditch that people did their business in. And most of the times it was uncovered. And like I said, and it was really little more than a hole in the ground. And I will quote, I attribute to the nauseating and depressing effects of the, and this is a new word, efflu, effluvia. So effluvia, I looked that up. That's basically vapor or gas from the cesspools and drains and the general filthiness of the place. So, one of the other things, like, when I was looking up a lot of this stuff, you're gonna see, if you do any research into this kind of stuff, a lot of references to miasma. So miasma is basically like the vapors or gases. And there were some doctors, probably considered quacks at the time, that actually realized that disease was probably carried in several different vectors, whereas most of the scientific population believed that miasma, or the vapors, that everything was airborne. Everything was airborne. So you'll see a lot of reference to that. And even, at this time, I mean, yes, some things are airborne, and we're going to get into some of that too. But that's kind of what they thought. Everything was airborne. And as far as just like the general cleanliness and filth and things like that, I did find too that personal hygiene back in this time period was not seen as a health or sanitary concern. It was a moral concern. Um, Basically, how you smelled basically advertised your class. Whereas a lot of the upper middle to upper class would use a lot of like lye soaps and carbolic soaps, things like that. Um, and I learned this too. A lot of the very poor used urine. So urine does have an acid in it. It's uric acid, and it's actually still used in a lot of cosmetics and things like that today. But that's how they would clean their clothes, is with urine. So you could only imagine the smell that you just, I guess you went nose blind to. So yeah, so just very different practices during this time. Now it was also extremely normal to when these cesspools would get full, they would have men basically come in with buckets, and they didn't pump it. They didn't have pump trucks or anything like that. So everything just got swished out into the street, everything into the street, right on top of all the dung from all the horses and carriages and things like that, and slop jars, and they had no garbage pickup, anything like that. So everything just went into the street. And eventually, it found its way into the sewers, and from the sewers, it found its way into the Thames. And along the way, it contaminated a lot of groundwater, and the Thames was actually the main source of drinking water for the city. So you could only imagine. Yeah, it was pretty nasty. So, but let's see what's going on real quick within the comments, and we'll continue. And this is so weird. The comments have changed, it seems like. All right, so let me go back to where I was. Hang on just a second, because I see a bunch of people have come in. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to see everybody. So Connor's here. Hi, Connor. Hi, Tia. How are you? And Calvin, my man. I tell you what, it's just not the same stream unless Calvin's in here with us. I tell you. How are you doing, Calvin? And then Jenny says, my 8-year-old says, it's amazing we can have teachers who are like you. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I love this stuff. I really love this stuff. So thank you. Hi, Dizzy. How are you? And Razzle Dazzle. Hey, Raz. How are you? Nadine. And there's Ange. Hi, Ange. Ange says, hey, Odd Mother. It's great to see you. Well, I'm so glad to be back. And we have a new victim in the crypt. Hello, George. How are you? It's great to see you. And I'm so glad you have decided to join us. And then, of course, the demon, the devil with the mostest hexes is here. And let's see. Hello, hello, hello. And I can never pronounce the way you got your name spelled. Channel 9. Hello, Channel 9. Hi, Donald. How are you? Yes, I know who you are. So Donald says, this is Donald with East Coast Haunters, sending love. Well, thank you. And we are so glad you're here. All right. Okay. All right. So yeah, so everybody pretty much smelled awful. The place was stinky. It was overcrowded. It was polluted. It was nasty. And it only gets worse. But there's more. So so now in July of 1842, the most important 19th century publication on social reform was released. It was titled, and this is a mouthful, and this is what I am basing a lot of this off of, especially the first person accounts. It is the report on the sanitary conditions of the laboring population of Great Britain. That is the name of the book. The report on the sanitary conditions of the laboring population of Great Britain. Now, this inquiry into sanitation was the brainchild of lawyer Edwin Chadwick. He led a team of commissioners traveling the country trying to document basically the lives of the poor. And I will quote Chadwick. In a large proportion of cases in the metropolis and in some of the manufacturing district, one room serves one family of the laboring class. It is their bedroom, their kitchen, their wash house, their sitting room, their dining room, and when they do not follow any outdoor occupation, it is frequently their workroom and their shop. In this one room, they are born and live and sleep and die amidst the other inmates. Now, what could you expect? Well, for diseases, they were very, very common. We have smallpox, we have measles, we have scarlatina, whooping cough, diarrhea, dysentery, cholera, influenza, or what they would refer to as fever, which is typhus. So, and many, many, many more. But those were the diseases that were extremely commonplace, as well as extremely, extremely easy to catch. Now, early in Chadwick's career, he had worked under the reformist Jeremy Bentham, and his philosophy of greater happiness was a seminal influence. The report was initially classified as the fever inquiry. That's what this particular report was supposed to be named. And it was the result of a frequent or many frequent cholera epidemics suffered by the lower class. Now, unsurprisingly, given the cramped conditions of the slums, child mortality rates were extremely high throughout the 19th century. Indeed, while the statistics show that the proportion of children surviving beyond their first birthday rose steadily over the course of the century in most London boroughs, this was certainly not the case in the inner city slums. Now, the statistics show that 1 in 5 infants died at 12 months or younger within the slums. What's more, in some of the really bad areas like Old Nickel Street, which is one of the city's most notorious slum areas, it was 1 in 4 babies never made it to see their first birthday. This number may have even been higher, since many births and therefore infant deaths simply went unrecorded, as the babies were not given a proper burial. And it wasn't just the babies. Like the mortality rate in general was very, very high. And I'm going to just go through this, and then we'll go to a commercial when we get done with this. So what you could expect if you were an adult, a poor Londoner, even if you made it past your first birthday, the odds of making it to middle age or even old age were not good at all. For males, the work was hard and dangerous. In fact, the best statistics, if you took all the statistics and put them together, suggest that the life expectancy for a casual laborer, and that's not even a hard work, like a hard laborer, but for the casual laborer in the 19th century London was 19 years old. 18, you were over the hill, buddy. It was around the same for females, so male and female shared it. Now, while teenage girls were unlikely to die on construction sites, falling pregnant could and often did prove fatal. Now, Chadwick writes from his reports of the time, the average age of all who die in some ill-conditioned district of the metropolis being 26 years only, which in better-conditioned districts, it could go up to 36. Variations of age of deaths being in some provincial towns, such as Leicester, and also, I believe it was Liverpool, was 15 years old. And if it was not quite as ill-conditioned, maybe 24. As between town and rural, anywhere between 17 and 18 years of age was kind of the whole, and like if you rounded it all up for the whole population, and 39 years for the whole population of Hereford. So that would have probably been more out in the country, I would imagine. So, and he did quote, the children born and bred up in London were more frequently of small stature and having slender limbs, or deficient in stamina, powers of endurance, or of irritable frames and prone to inflammatory attacks than children that were born and bred in the country. So they did see a difference there. They did realize that the people that were living in London were just sicker. They were just, they didn't live very long. And the total excess of deaths and funerals in England and Wales alone during this time being at the very least between 30 and 40,000 annually would die. So, yeah, we're going to get into the nitty gritty. So I hope you're not squeamish. But first, we're going to go to a commercial break. Guilty of witchcraft.
qualified psychic and spiritual medium who gives accurate psychic readings through a range of mediums. She is a professional consultant who uses her intuition to offer guidance to all of her clients, encouraging them to move in a positive direction and face the challenges that may lie ahead of them. She is also certified Reiki Grand Master and Shaman. Follow her on Facebook or YouTube each week for her weekly free live readings.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDC TV. Now back to the show.
And we're back. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. Yeah, let's see. Time to get used to this. The comments moved. Okay. So let's go back to where we were. Hang on just a second. I hope I'm not putting my finger in everybody's face. I'm like really good about doing that for some reason. All right, let's see. Oh, so Ka made some homemade hummus. Oh my goodness. Nom 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 nom. I love me some hummus. All right, let's see. Janelle! Oh my gosh. See, it was on the tip of my tongue. And I was like, I can't read, blah, 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 blah. Actually, it looks like little blocks to me. So, but yes, hey. And look, guys, if you guys haven't checked out her and her partner, Greg, you need to go check them out because they do some amazing cemetery restoration. See, there's some of my fellow tapophiles. We absolutely love cemeteries, and they have really done, in my humble opinion, a lot for their community as far as bringing a lot of these really, really old cemeteries back to life, so to speak, because I think that's, kind of odd mama's philosophy is that we should take care of our dead. We should, pretty much want to leave that for the next generation. So, because that's history. History's important. History is important because you don't want to make the same mistakes that you've made before. So yeah, we need to keep record of that. Is my philosophy. So, and then Razzle Dazzle, he's sending love right back from Midwest Haunters, and we love our Raz. And there, hello Delphine. We are so glad. She says caw 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 caw. So we are so glad she's in the house. And then Akash says she had scarlet fever. Yeah, it's contagious. That's the one where they have to like get rid of all your stuff, like the Velveteen Bunny type story, like where everything has to be like sanitized and stuff, isn't it? And then John, we are so glad one of our followers and supporters here never read or ever read People of the Abyss by Jack London. It's about the London poor. It's an absolute horror story. I would imagine so. I mean, I knew that they were bad conditions, John, but I didn't realize how bad. And we're about to get into that. It's a wonder anybody survived, to be very honest with you. Like, I think if we were to get in a time machine and go back, because even some of our really, degraded areas that really need to be cleaned up, they could not touch a finger to this. I mean, like if we were to go back, I don't think we could survive, honestly, because of our sanitary conditions, even what we consider unsanitary. I don't think we would be able to survive. We probably last about a week and then we would come down with a fever. And then Hexa says it was all that pee pee in the air. Well, it's a whole. There is some stuff in the air besides coal dust and pee pee. Yeah, so we're about to get into that here in just a second. All right, and Donald, I'll get with you later. I'll get with you later if you're talking to me. I'm not sure who you're talking about. Let's see, and then what do we got here? Oh, and then Tia says she's trying to fight sickness. I'm sorry. I tell you, there's a lot of cooties going around, but you know what? Be happy. It's not scarlatina, smallpox. What was the other one? Like cholera, anything like that. So, but I do hope you feel better. I really, really do. And then Jonelle says, "Oh, thank you, much appreciated. Not many people actually care in our town or state. It's kind of sad. It really is. It really is because they're from up north, Maine, if I'm correct, which is actually kind of like I don't know. You think of those areas around in there, Massachusetts, Maine, all those areas, Boston, stuff like that. It's kind of like where our history as like Anglo-Saxons and Irish and all the people that came over, that's kind of where everything started. So to me, I think what you guys are doing is absolutely phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, you need to go check them out if you really get into like history and stuff like that. Go check them out and support them because what they do is just amazing. So Little Rhode Island. Okay, so Little Rhode Island. Yeah. Oh, okay, Donald. Okay. Absolutely. All right, so let's get back to this. All right, so and there's more. So not only did you have to worry about people defecating in the streets and throwing out their slop jars and throwing out their dead animals and horses pooping in the streets and oh the slaughterhouses dumping barrels of guts and stuff like that onto the streets and into the streams and into the rivers. Um, you also had to, and there was also another waste removal problem that plagued London in the 19th century, and that was the disposal of their dead. There was little dispute about the means. Of course, burial was the normal. Cremation was actually a very peculiar and foreign custom, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it may have been considered illegal in those areas. It would eventually be legalized, but um, cremation is just something they did not do. The difficulty lay in finding room in an ever increasing number of with an ever increasing number of corpses. So not only was there, people, the poor were finding hardships trying to find places to live. They were having a hard time finding places to be buried, and you're going to find out why here in just a second. So the capital's large population growth upon and as far as the way that it affected the deceased, the cemeteries were filling up. They were just filling up the small churchyards, burial grounds, vaults, just at an astounding rate. Now Chadwick did record in his book that basically in all of London you had about 120 chapels in and around London, and he says I believe there is not more than a sixth part of them that have graveyards. So basically, about half, really, maybe had graveyards or vaults or some sort of way to bury their dead, their congregation. Now, in the metropolis, on spaces of ground which did not exceed, or as far as cemeteries themselves, these grounds in all of London, when you put them together in a total, did not exceed 203 acres. So you had all of London, 120 churches, only half of them had places to bury people. And of all that, if you put it all together, it would be only around 203 acres, which really isn't that much. Now, closely, and these burial areas were closely surrounded by the abodes of the living. Now, layer upon layer, each consisting of a population numerically equivalent to a large army of 20,000 adults and nearly 30,000 youths and children, um, were put in there every year, or what they refer to as imperfectly interned. Within the period of the existence of the present generation, upwards of 1 million of the dead must have been interned in those same spaces. So, imperfectly interned, what exactly do you think that means? Well, the consequences, whenever demand exceeds supply, were decidedly unpleasant. Coffins were stacked one on top of another and put into 20-foot deep shafts. The topmost were mere inches from the surface. Putrefied bodies were frequently disrupted, dismembered, or destroyed to make room for newcomers. Disinterred bones, dropped by neglectful grave diggers, laid scattered amidst the tombstones. Smashed coffins were sold to the poor for firewood. Clergymen and sexton often turned a blind eye to the worst of the practices because because their flock or congregation were the extreme poor, that was really their only means of any type of income for the church or for themselves or what have you. There would just be a macabre scene that awaited anyone who pried too closely to the digger's work. And this is what one of them quotes: "I saw them chopping the head off his coffin. I should not have known it if I had not seen the head with the teeth. I knew him by his teeth. One tooth was knocked out, and the other was splintered. I knew it was my father's head, and I told them to stop, and they laughed." Now, clearance of long buried bones had always taken place, but the growing demand for burials in crowded grounds meant the work became even more grisly. And Chadwick quotes, "These grounds are morally offensive and appear to be physically dangerous in proportion to the numbers interned in them. The numbers interred depends or appears to be at a rate of more than 2,300 per acre annually." Now, the standard was typically that every grave should contain at least 10 coffins, and the vaults located under the churches and chapels were no better. And Chadwick writes, because I do like to give it to you in the first person: "The vaults and burial ground attached to Brunswick Chapel, Limehouse, are much crowded with dead, and from the accounts of individuals residing in the adjoining houses, it would appear that the stench arising therefrom, particularly when a grave happens to be open during the summer months, is most noxious. In one case, it is described to have produced instant nausea and vomiting, and attacks of illness are frequently imputed to it, because again, they believe that everything is carried by air and smells. Some say they have never had a good day's health since they have resided so near the chapel ground, which I may remark is about 5 feet above the level of the surrounding other yards, and very muddy, so much so that pumps are frequently used to expel the water from the vault into the streets." But disease and toxic air pollution were not the only dangers. Unless watched and tapped to allow the mephitic, so basically your body gases, the mephitic vapors or gases to escape, the bursting of leaden coffins in the vaults of cemeteries and chapels was a very real and frequent occurrence. So basically, exploding coffins, as well as the flammable nature of the gases, with sometimes fires burning for days within the catacombs and vaults beneath the churches. Chadwick recorded from another undertaker, "I have known coffins to explode like the report of a small gun in the house," because back then the wakes and everything were in the houses. "I was once called up at midnight by the people, who were in great alarm, and who stated that the coffin had burst in the night, As they described it, it sounded like the report of a large cannon. On proceeding to the house, I found that in this case, which was one of dropsy, they died of dropsy, very rapid decomposition had occurred, and the lead was forced up. Now, not to mention, with the living residing in such close proximity to the dead, the bacterium in the air would cause butchered meats, food, and cheese rennet, which is like the cheese cultures, to turn putrid within a very short period of time, sometimes even within hours. Now, to compound the problem and the vicious circle that London was finding itself in, often sewers ran directly under or through these burial grounds and graveyards, which would contaminate drinking wells and rivers along the way. Because these coffins, because we didn't have, well, I don't want to say we didn't have, but the very poor could not afford any type of embalming process of any type. And we've come a long way with that, but so they were not embalmed. So these bodies would basically leak juices because it was just corpse juice. Corpse juice everywhere. Just corpse juice. It's just everything, covered everything. Um, because of the clay compound of the ground in London. It's basically, if any of you guys are from the South, like Georgia red clay, except I think it's gray or maybe black. I can't remember. But yeah, so the corpse juice had no place to go, but through crevices, when it rained into, your drinking water or come up and run into the streets or, so it was, must have been a very pleasant place to live. Um, Now, Chadwick did write injuries sustained by gravediggers from the escapes of miasma, which again is vapors, smells, on the reopening of graves, and an instance was stated to me by the architect of one cemetery of two laborers having been injured, apparently by digging amidst some impure waters or corpse juice, which drained from the graves. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then I think we will be going to another commercial, and then let's see, how much do we have? We don't have too much more. And then we'll be finishing up here, it looks like. Let's see what's going on in the comments. All right, let's see. Yes, so Nadine says, refreshing corpse juice. Very refreshing. And then Donald says, I believe that's why they had so many different diseases, because the ground has so much rot and decay in the soil and water also. Yeah, I did a series on the Black Plague, and like when they dig up, which they're still digging up. Yes, bog butter. Sorry, I didn't mean to squirrel. We'll get into that in just a minute. But when they were digging up, like to put a lot of like the chunnel and things like that in a lot of these places on the British Isles, would come across the plague pits, and they were able to still be able to get DNA from the tooth pulp. If they removed a tooth from the skull of one of the plague victims. So yeah, things just don't degrade very quickly in a very clay type soil, just like bog butter, just like bog bodies. Yeah, I would try bog butter. I would absolutely try bog butter. I'm sorry, it just looks like it would be good, as long as we made sure it actually wasn't a sheep that fell in there like 300 years ago and just turned into like a mass of like body fat, because they can look very similar. So yeah, I don't want to eat a petrified like bog sheep, but I will try some bog butter. And then Hexus says, back in the day, we demons called them coffin farts. And then Akash says, this talk don't bother me while I'm eating. I'm desensitized. Let's see. And then Nexus says, this Sunday, 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 Gravedigger will jump 20,000 improperly buried people. Oh my gosh. Hi, Mikey. How are you? So glad you are here. And then Jonelle says, must have been many unmarked mass graves during these times. Oh, yeah. Like they're still uncovering them all the time. Yeah. Right, John? John says Soylent Green. Soylent Green is people. Nom, nom, nom. All right. Let's see. Anything I've missed here? And then Jenny says, when my dad was shipped from Texas to Georgia without being embalmed, he did bulge and grow because of the gases. Yeah, a lot of times too, like the like well not embalmers, but the what we consider medical examiners now, um, would actually have to tap the bodies in a lot of cases, like the stomachs, and burn off the gases. Like they had this little like a little candle, you know, and that they would use. It was kind of interesting in an odd sort of way. Oh, and John wants to know what bog butter is. All right, so quick explanation of what bog butter is. So bog butter, back a long time, like back a long time ago, like even before I was around and died, born and died, and because I am 148 years old. Um, you like butter was scarce, and people would use it basically for money. So they would a lot of times save it for like a rainy day. Where we put back money for a rainy day, they put back butter, and they would put it in the bogs. They would put it in like think of like a hollowed out section of a tree to where it's just like the bark. They would put it in that a cast of some sort. Um, and they would wrap it usually in a sack, and they would put it down in the bogs because the bogs lack any type of oxygen, as well as a lot of enzymes and probably amoebas and different things like that that act differently. With it really doesn't allow things to rot. They kind of more like mummify, sort of. If you've ever seen any pictures of like bog bodies and stuff, they've pulled a lot of bodies out of there that are like hundreds of years old. And so they were pulling out these things, that was in these casks. And they were like, well, I don't know what it is. And so somebody somewhere said, well, I'll try it. And so like you can like, I don't know where you'd go to do it, but eat like 600-year-old butter. Some of them look good though. They said it's like a mix between like butter and like maybe a Swiss cheese or something by that point. But a lot of like cheeseries and things like that will actually like kind of ferment their cheese now in the bogs for a very short period of time. But it's like a specialty. Like some people like the way that it tastes. So I don't know. I'd try it. I'd probably try it. So that's your quick That's your quick explanation of bog butter. You can look it up on Google. Hi, Delphine. How are you? She says Eleanor Rigby was busy then. See, that makes me want to sing the Beatles song. All right, let's see. Hi, Mike Phelps. How are you? And then Donald says, "I look very good." Well, I tell you, I use the special cream to keep all these bones, pliable and intact. But it's no pain, no gain. It's hard work for a 148-year-old woman. So, but we make it happen. So let's get back to what we were. Oh wait, were we going to a commercial, Oz? I think we were going to a commercial. So let's do that, and then we'll finish up.
Hello, all you beautiful people out there. It's your boy Slippy. And when I'm not guzzling down gallons and gallons of amazing ice cream, yes, oh, I love ice cream. Oh, hang on. I'm watching PBDC TV. Now, back to the show, all you beautiful people. And remember, stay nasty.
And we're back. All right, so let's see. We have moved from exploding coffins, and we're gonna kind of move on to kind of how the poor dealt with their dead. So the living spaces for workers, as we've already kind of gone into, lacked all the basic facilities like proper water, clean sewage. There were any type of available like fresh air or circulation through ventilation, and more importantly, food. Despite toiling hard hours and long hours, the wages that were paid to these workers were insufficient for really for their survival. Now, to give you a real kind of understanding of what the conditions were like, I'm just going to read again a first person account from Chadwick. It says, here the inhabitants were very thickly crowded, and among the children there is always much more mortality. In one house, at the time of taking the census, there were 80 persons in this tenement house. The inhabitants consisted of coachmen and their families. Is do many of the mews in this district are people. This class is frequently intempered. They live over stables, are ignorant of the necessity for free ventilation, and many appear to be suffering the consequences for it. Some of the houses are in bad condition and inhabited by the poorest families. No attention to ventilation, supply of butcher's meat is casual and infrequent. Pneumonia and bronchitis are frequently fatal in these poor districts, and he who enters the damp, dark, underground kitchens, in which all the occupants live and sleep, in which the room is made more close by a fire that is required for cooking, the atmosphere is loaded with moisture from the wet clothes hung across the narrow space to dry, and probably some child ill of disease sees that such a state of his surrounding circumstances shuts out all chance of recovery in at least the majority of these cases. So again, what and how did London's poor deal with their dead? Well, Chadwick answered that for us too. There are some houses in my district that have upwards of 45 to 60 persons of all ages under one roof. That would be a tenement house. They rent rooms. In the event of death, the body often occupies the only bed until the family can raise money to pay for a coffin, which is often takes several days. Now, when Chadwick did ask an undertaker in his survey, the average time that the body would normally stay with the family, just because they were trying to not only raise the money, but also find a place to bury them, would be somewhere between about 5 to 12 days that the dead would be taking up the only bed in the home. Now, he did also write the liquid generates animal life very rapidly. And within 6 hours after a coffin has been tapped, if the liquid escapes, maggots or any sort of animal curio, so all kinds of different body bugs, okay, are seen crawling about. I have frequently seen them crawling about the floor of a room inhabited by the laboring class and about the trestles on which the tapped coffin is sustained. In such rooms, the children are frequently left while the widow is out making arrangements connected to the funeral, and the widow herself lives there with the children. I frequently find them together in a small room with a large fire. So basically, maggots would be pouring out of these coffins once they'd been tapped, and you have to tap them to keep them from exploding. Um, and they would just be crawling around everywhere, body bugs everywhere, corpse juice everywhere, kids playing in it. I just Now, if Londoners poor were afforded no decency in living, they definitely had none when they were dead. And he writes, the whole of this I can testify from personal knowledge to be just. With the upper classes, a corpse excites the feeling of awe and respect. With the lower orders in these districts, it is often treated with as little ceremony as the carcass in a butcher's shop. Nothing can exceed their desire, however, for an imposing funeral. Nothing can surpass their efforts to obtain it. But the deceased remains share none of the revenants which the anxiety for their upcoming burial would seem to indicate. Now, in general, it was the want of money to defray the dues or the cost of burial that would cause this. Now, in some cases, however, the widow or family would be reluctant to part with the corpse for the fear of the family member being buried alive, and we've talked about that before too. So that was some of their fears, and of course, even in the burial process, it was no less inhumane. Chadwick wrote, in the cemetery at Liverpool, where Mr. Lusickson was interned, is the practice to pile the coffins of the poorest class in the deepest graves or pits, one coffin over the other, with only a thin covering layer of earth over each coffin until the pit is filled. When it holds upwards of 30, as the sexton expressed, and the sexton, for anybody that doesn't know, is the person that takes care of the graveyard, is about 34 big and little. That's how he would measure it. So yeah, so we're going to stop there for the night, and when we come back for the part two, we were talking about dealing with the dead. So next time we're going to be talking about dancing on the dead. Woohoo! So that's going to be a very interesting one. Very, very interesting one. So I hope you enjoyed this tonight. And let me see what's going on in the comments real quick before we say adieu. All right, let's get back up to where we were. All right. Hi, Ryan. How are you? So glad we have another victim here in the crypt. So glad you can join us. Hi, Raven. How are you? Yes, Janelle, it does sound like a good time, doesn't it? That's what Janelle writes. Let's see. Delphine, she says, just crawling around on the floor with the maggots and the corpse juice, hoping that Uncle Joe's coffin doesn't explode. Coffin tapping sounds like a very morbid game of hot potato, right? Like what if you tap it at the wrong time? Like, that glass cup that just gets like knocked against everything and never seems to break, and then finally just one day you just doop, just touch it and it explodes. Yeah, I mean, like, what if you go to tap a coffin and it's like a party favor, just all in your face? That's kind of like coffin Russian roulette, wouldn't it be? Or hot potato, that would work too. And so John says, didn't they have body snatchers then? And we're going to get into that next week with the body snatchers. Like I said, when I started looking into this, because the London's Magnificent Seven are on my bucket list. I absolutely want to go to these places. Like I said, each one is special in their own way. They were reserved for particular religions or people of non-religions or dissidents, as I think they referred to them, nonconformists. So yeah, we'll be going through those and a list of some of the well-known people that are buried at some of them. So, but yes, they did have a problem with body snatchers, and we're going to get into that next week. So that'll be part of Dancing on the Dead. Let's see. And then John says, good show, Mother. Can't wait till next time. I am so super excited to be back, y'all. You just don't know how much I have missed you guys. And then Hexa says, invasion of the body snatchers. And then Maud says, corpse juice jet in your face. Oh my God. Could you imagine? Oh. And look, if you want to read this book, it's not a long read. And let me go back up and get the name for you. And there'll be a link in my show notes. I'll be putting some show notes up on YouTube sometime within the next few hours on this video that's on YouTube. So I'll put a link in there. Where did I have it? Are you kidding me? It like disappeared right in front of my eyeballs. Hold on. Like, how could I lose that? Like, the title is so daggum long. Okay, here we go. So if you want to read it, it's way out of copyright. You can actually just go to archive.org and get like a sort of like a Kindle copy of it. But it's called The Report on the Sanitary Conditions of the Laboring Population of Great Britain. And it gets really, really into like stories of exploding coffins and people dying of corpse juice. And it gets into a lot of stuff. Like if I were to go over everything that was in this book, this stream would be like part 25. So, but it's actually very interesting if you like this kind of history. So, go check it out, and you can find it for free online at archive.org, and it's not a long read. So, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed the little history lesson tonight. Let's see, Janelle says part 2 next Friday. We're gonna see if it's not next Friday, because of the holiday. Then it will be the Friday after. But yes, that will be part 2. But I'll announce it. We haven't decided yet if I'm going to be doing this every week or every other week, because we've just got a lot going on with the new company and the new things that we've got rolling out. It's taken all of us. Like, we are seriously, like, if we could tape the behind the scenes, we never sleep. We never sleep here. We are constantly doing something, getting in touch with somebody, trying to do some sort of networking and just cool stuff for you guys. So, yeah, it'll either be next Friday or the Friday after, but I'll let everybody know. But yeah, that's going to be a fun one. That's going to be, well, it's going to be a different one. It's going to be a different one. So, but pleasant nightmares, everybody. And see you next time. Bye.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. There is nothing wrong with your device. Join me here on Psycho Bunny DC. A delightfully dreadful consternation of horror content. Turn heads